The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the man we're welcoming is a Grammy-nominated recording engineer. He's a staff engineer at Capitol Studios since 1994. Steve Genewick. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Just for all the listeners out there that may not be sure, just tell us in layman's terms, what is a recording engineer?
My basic job is to capture the performance of the artist in the room. So I like to say when you see a picture of the recording studio and all that equipment and all those buttons, I know what all that stuff does. But my main job is just to capture the performance and to get it recorded onto what originally was tape and now is mostly a computer in a digital format. But so as an engineer, that's my job, is to capture the sound.
In the process of recording, somebody who doesn't know, for example, myself, what all the knobs and buttons do, how much learning is involved to learn the processes and learn the functions of all of the equipment?
The actual technical learning the equipment, it can be difficult. There's a lot of stuff in the room. But that's a very technical thing, so it's learning to use a computer, or learning to, I guess it'd be equivalent to driving a car and learning what all the buttons in your car do. But that's just kind of book knowledge, is knowing how an EQ works or how a compressor works or how the console works. The hardest part of the job is dealing with the people and knowing, sometimes we have to sit in a room with people for 15 or 16 hours a day. And that's the most challenging part. Learning how a session runs, learning when to speak up, when not to speak up, that kind of stuff.
So you're saying the most challenging thing is the dealing with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always a challenge, but that's the part that they can't teach you at school or they can't teach you in a book. That's the stuff you learn from experience.
So tell us, what would be a typical challenge that maybe you would face? Like today, this happened with, you don't have to name the name of the artist, but something that may come up when you're at Capitol Studios.
It could be any range of things. It could be a technical issue. If we have, something break down on a session, it's my job to get it fixed or patch around it to keep the session flowing so that the artist and the producer doesn't have to worry about any of the technical aspects of it. So a technical problem is, at least it's a kind of a black and white thing. It's cut and dry as to what we have to do to fix it and get the session moving. A more difficult, intangible kind of thing is, sometimes people have a bad day if they have a bit of a cold and they're not singing well and it's frustrating to them, or, maybe they had a fight with their wife before they came in. Who knows? It's, a bad mood is a bad mood. And if people are trying to perform, sometimes that can be tough. Could be that the parking guy pissed them off on the way in, and now they're upset, and we have to then figure out a way to turn the mood around to get a good performance out of them.
How did you get involved in studio recording?
When I was in high school, I had friends that were in bands and stuff, and I liked hanging out and doing that, and realized I was never going to be the musician in the band, and I didn't really want to push road cases around and be a roadie. And I saw kind of the sound guy at the console and thought, oh, that looks interesting, and started looking into it. And this is in the late 80s. And then I did go to school for a minute in one of the very early recording programs. But a month or two into that, a friend of mine at the school had been working at a studio, and he actually got fired. And I just went down and got the job that he had. And I started working in a studio. Started as the night runner, getting food and cleaning up and that kind of stuff, and just absorbing all I could. And it went on from there.
We're speaking with Steve Genewick. He's been a staff engineer at Capitol Studios since 1994. What is Capitol Studios like as a workplace?
It's the greatest studio in the world. It's probably maybe the second most famous studio in the world after Abbey Road, which is our sister studio. But it's fantastic. I love working there. It's obviously I've been there so long now. But we have great clients. We do all kinds of different kinds of sessions, records, rock albums, jazz records, not a lot of classical, but some. We do a lot of movie scoring. We do live performance stuff. So it's really fun to get to work on a wide range of different kinds of projects. And in the 20-some years I've been there, I've worked with just about everybody I ever wanted to. Most of my heroes have come through the door, which is always fun.
So in this wide range of types of recordings that you make, across the board, what would you say makes for a quality recording?
If you're talking about the technical recording, it's the musicians in the room, how well they play, how good their instruments sound, and then the equipment we have, the high quality equipment. From an artistic point of view, it's all about the song and the performance. If it's a bad song, it's a bad song. There's nothing I can do to make it sound good. Sometimes I can get a really good recording of a bad song, but still a bad song.
On the other side, speaking of great songs, this is the third release from Bob Dylan, where he's interpreting these old songs, and they're great songs. You mentioned that you've met pretty much everybody and have gotten to work with pretty much everybody that you could possibly dream of. How did you meet Bob Dylan? Tell us about the circumstances of that.
I work with an engineer, a very famous engineer named Al Schmidt, and Bob's manager had contacted Al and said, Bob wants to make this record. He wants to do kind of standards, and would you do it? And Al jumped at the chance. So naturally, I was immediately involved in that. Al came in one day and said, hey, we're going to do a record with Bob Dylan. I said, wow, that sounds great. Okay. We kind of went over the parameters of how Bob wanted to do it. He was very specific about he wanted to do it all live, everybody in the same room, no overdubs. So just performance. They didn't even use headphones. So, Al and I went through our normal process. We found out what the instrumentation was going to be, and we got our setup together and put all our ducks in a row technically. And first day came, and actually the first day was supposed to be a setup day. The band was going to show up, and we were just going to kind of get them seated and situated and get all our mics set up and kind of get everything checked out for Bob to come in the next day and start recording. And lo and behold, Bob showed up on the setup day. So I think we were recording within about an hour, which was fun. He doesn't mess around. He just kind of wants to go. So he just comes in and says hi, and we start recording.
And this is Bob Dylan's third album of classic American songs, standards from the American Songbook. If you could speculate, what do you suppose it is that is inspiring him to go this direction?
It's all speculation. Didn't really talk about it. But I think he's probably always been a fan of the songs, would be my guess. And I think just exploring the songs themselves and the structure of them and how they were written and all that kind of stuff, I think it just piqued an interest in him, and he wanted to do it. It's hard to say. Bob's a very private guy. So, we didn't get into too much of the backstory about why we were doing it. But it was fun to do.
So you found him to be kind of distant in a way.
I wouldn't say distant. I would say private. I mean, once he gets to know you and you're in the room, he's a very nice guy. He's very funny. He talks. It's not like he sits in a corner and does nothing. He's just a regular guy. I think he just doesn't like all his entire life being led in the public eye.
Yeah. Well, are there particular tracks from this recent one, Triplicate, that to you stood out?
Let me look. I actually have a copy of it right here. On CD1, That Old Feeling. I always liked that one. These Foolish Things was great. All the songs they're such great songs. It's hard to pick just one or two. I wouldn't say anything stands out as far as like something that happened in the studio or anything like that, but they're all just such great songs. It's hard to pick one.
How long did it take to record these songs? It's quite a lot of songs, 30 in all.
Yeah, I think we were in for about 5 weeks total. Maybe 3 weeks recording and a couple weeks of mixing, maybe 4 weeks recording and a couple weeks mixing. And a lot of the mixes actually we ended up not using the mixes. We ended up using Al's live mixes from the session.
You know, the number of artists, if anyone wants to go on your website, stevegenewick.com, very iconic artists that you've worked with. Bob Dylan, as we've been talking about, also Paul McCartney. There's just so many. The late Al Jarreau. Is it intimidating at all when you work with these artistic giants?
I think I've been doing it so long now with so many kind of big artists that I very rarely get starstruck anymore. I mean, the first time Paul McCartney walks in the room and, you know, says, "Hi, I'm Paul," that's a little intimidating. You know, anytime there's a Beatle around, we like to say it's everybody's a little more on edge. Yeah, when you meet these people, it's great. And there's that first moment of, oh my God, there he is. That's the guy. And then usually they make you feel very at home. You know, with Paul, he walks up, he says, "Hi, I'm Paul. Thanks for being here. You know, this is going to be great." And within a couple minutes, we're just working. Once we get down to it, they have a job to do, I have a job to do. Everybody's there to get a record made, so we just kind of get to it. So, you know, I don't know that I get intimidated by anybody, but it's pretty cool. Once in a while, you know, you push the mic up and Paul McCartney's voice comes out of the speaker and he's standing on the other side of the glass singing. It's pretty cool.
Would you say that's one of the more rewarding things about your job, or those moments like that?
Oh, absolutely. That's what it's for. When, you know, somebody counts it off and suddenly you hear the magic happening and you know that that's going to be the great take. You know, there's nothing like that. Makes the hairs on your arm stand up.
If you look at the albums you've worked on, there are so many of them that are artists that are interpreting the American songbook.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? Is it because of Capitol Studios?
Yes, definitely. Well, that's where it started with me, you know. It's kind of, that's where a lot of those songs were made famous, with the Sinatras, and, you know, Sinatra did a lot of his stuff there, and Dean Martin and all those kind of artists. So, you know, the studios are set up to do that. We do a lot of big band sessions, a lot of, you know, Great American Songbook type records. And then also I started working with Al Schmidt, and he's kind of the master at that stuff. So we just kind of fell into it. But yeah, I've done a lot of those kind of standards albums, and I love them. You know, they're the greatest songs in the world. They're the greatest songs that have ever been written. So they're really fun to work on.
We're talking with recording engineer Steve Genewick. Al Schmidt, who you work with, was a guest on this show. Very nice guy, and he was very easy, like yourself, to talk to. What would you say Al Schmidt has taught you?
Wow, he's taught me just about everything. From a technical side, he taught me a different way of recording than I had kind of started off with. He does not use a lot of the equipment in the room. He uses great microphones and really good mic preamps, but we very rarely use EQ and compression. It's a very natural way to record, which is it's a real art, and it's kind of a dying art, and I'm glad I was able to learn it from him. But also just his mannerism in the studio. You know, like you said, he's a great guy, and people are comfortable around him, and you know, I've learned how to handle myself in the studio. He's been a fantastic mentor to me, and a great friend. You know, we've been around the world doing projects together, and we've had a lot of fun doing it. We're still doing it. Start another record on Monday. So, you know, we're busy, which is nice.
Can you tell us what the record is on Monday, or is that top secret?
No, I don't know if I want to get into that just yet.
Okay. It's
a big artist, though.
Okay, cool. There was another person who was a guest on this show that was very, very interesting, who you have a credit on his last studio album, That Face, Frank Sinatra Jr.
Mm-hmm.
What are your memories from making that album?
You know what? We had a lot of fun on that record. We had done a couple of records with Frank Jr. He was an interesting guy. You know, again, he kind of had a bad rap in the public, but I never saw anything like that. I always thought he had a very kind of dry sense of humor, but he was a fantastic guy, told great stories, you know, was really into it for the music. And, you know, he's kind of the first guy in, last guy out, willing to do the work. We had a great time with him. It was really fun. You know, unfortunately, it ended up being his last record. But, he'll be missed. He was a fun guy to hang around with.
Are there times, I'm sure there are, when you're in public, you're in a restaurant or something, and you hear over the sound system something that you worked on, something that you were a part of creating and bringing out there in the world? What is that like for you?
That's a pretty cool feeling. What happens more times than not is I'll hear something and not kind of regular go like, man, how come that sounds so familiar to me? If it's not a big record or if it's something I just did a little bit of work on, that's actually more fun going, how come I know all the words to this song? Oh yeah, I forgot I did work on this song. I did all the strings on this song or whatever it is. But yeah, it's always fun to hear the stuff you did on the radio or, sitting in a restaurant, stuff like that. We get it a lot with Diana Krall's records because, her records are played all over the place. So I'll be walking through somewhere and hear Diana start singing and just brings a smile to my face. Something to be proud of.
I have a smile on my face because you can't see it, but in my hands I've got a little cheat sheet about some of the points I want to touch on. And next on the list I have an asterisk and Diana Krall. What is Diana Krall like?
She's the best. She's probably my favorite artist to work with. I've been working with her for almost 20 years now. She's such a talented singer and piano. She's probably my favorite piano player in the world. And she's just such a sweetheart. She's become a pretty good friend. We talk, we text. Today, the new record comes out, the one we just finished, which is a fantastic record. All of us are really proud of that. And again, she's just the best. I love her to death.
And the producer of that album, the recent album from Diana Krall, Tommy LiPuma.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it was a great loss to music. We lost him. The recordings are still with us and always will. What are your memories of him?
I worked with Tommy on so many records. Tommy and Al have been a team since the late 60s. So pretty much everything that Tommy produced in the last 20 years, I had some kind of hand in helping out, usually as Al's assistant. There were some records where I was the engineer. It was great. It's, it's working with all these people, people like Al and Tommy and Phil Ramone, and, they're the best at what they do. And it's been really great for me to learn from these people, learn my job and my craft, which is great, but also they're just the greatest people in the world. Tommy and I spent days sitting in rooms editing vocals and, editing songs and mixing and that kind of stuff. So, he was a great hang. He was so smart, knew, he was a big art collector. So we could talk about art. We could talk about food. He was a big wine guy. It wasn't all about music, and just fun. You look, when Tommy passed a month or two ago, there was a lot of stuff on Facebook and whatnot. And I went back looking through some pictures and stuff. And the thing I noticed is that in almost every single picture, everybody laughing. We're smiling. We were always having a good time. So, and that was part of his thing, is to make everybody comfortable and even though sometimes making a record can be a lot of work, it still should be fun. So yeah, it was a great loss. He's going to be missed.
In any kind of work, no matter what it is, if you can enjoy the company of the people you're with, it just makes such a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Al's line is, we lie to our wives every day when we say we're going to work.
That's great. When you ask songwriters, what is your favorite song? It's almost impossible to get an answer because they always say, they're like my children. Same thing with actors. Same thing with authors about their books. So I'm going to ask it in kind of a different way. If you had to choose one of the recordings that you've worked on to represent your work, to represent what you do, which one would it be?
Wow. That's almost an impossible question, I think. It's interesting because when I think about the records that we've done, a lot of times my first impression of it is not necessarily the music, but I'm thinking about the actual process of doing it and how much fun we had, or what happened, or was it difficult, or was it easy? So that it's a really tough question. That, and because I do so many different kinds of things, it would be hard. It's hard to compare a Diana Krall record to a Toto album. It's even though the process is somewhat similar, it's hard to compare them for which one do you like better kind of stuff. I would say the records with Diana are probably my favorite. The stuff with Dylan was so much fun to do and so different. And, that would be a highlight, obviously. Getting to spend time with Paul McCartney. I got to spend a lot of time with him on the 2 projects that we did. So, again, for me, it's more about what happened while we were making the record as opposed to the actual music that you hear on it. Music's always good when you're talking about artists like that.
Again, you've just recorded with just the absolute legends in music, from Bob Dylan, Tony Bennett, Barry Manilow, Paul McCartney, Gladys Knight, Peggy Lee. I mean, we could just go on and on. Jackson Browne. Is there anyone, I'm sure there are, but let's just hear it from you, that you're still dying to work with?
I always want to work with Van Morrison. He's been on my list. Other than that, I've pretty much hit the highlights on the list, I think, of people that are still around. There's some people I wish I had worked with. I wish I didn't get to do the last Sinatra record. Al did that, but they did that the year before I started working at Capitol. So I would have loved to have worked with Sinatra, but I missed out on that. Other than that, there's always great artists coming along that you'd love to work with, but of the kind of iconic people, the one I always say is Van Morrison. I've just always been a big fan of his. Everybody else has kind of come through already. We like to say if you hang out at Capitol long enough, everybody shows up.
What is your favorite sound?
My favorite sound?
Yeah.
Like musically or just in general?
In the whole wide world.
I love the sound of babies laughing.
Oh, there's nothing like it.
That gut-busting laugh that a little baby can make. That's my favorite sound.
What is the best thing about being Steve Genewick?
The best thing? Yeah. Life is pretty good. I have a job I really like. I get to work with great people. I have a great family at home. I have 3 kids and a great wife, and I get to come home and hang out with them. I live in a great part of the country. It's sunny most of the time, and I gotta say, I don't have a lot of complaints. You always want more. I always want more work, more money, that kind of stuff. But I gotta say, I don't have a lot to complain about.
I'm gonna kind of leave it up to you, the last question. Keep it very open-ended. There's all different types of people listening in, from people who are just strictly fans of music to people who are into recording, all different types. What would you say in closing to anyone who's tuned in?
For us, it's all about the music. I grew up as a music fan. I think everybody I work with is a music fan. Even these artists, you talk to guys like McCartney or, Elton John's the first one to go out. Every Friday when the new records come out, he wants them all. He wants to listen to them. Be a fan of the music. It's such a powerful thing. It's emotional. That's what we're trying to convey when we make a record is that emotion. But, a song can bring you back to your grade school days or your high school days. It can remind you of, your first girlfriend or your last girlfriend or the day you got married or the day your kid was born. It's a pretty powerful thing, what music can do. So be a fan. There's a lot of great music out there. Even if it's stuff you don't think you'll like, maybe you will.
Anyone out there, if they want to find out more, I would invite them to visit the website. It's stevegenewick.com, GeneWick, stevegenewick.com. Thank you very much for giving us this insight into what you do.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure.
You bring a lot of smiles into the world.
Good. That's the idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thanks a lot.